And so what is the antidote? So as Father General has mentioned, so discernment is what is needed in this time, in this era full of challenges. Togetherness. Father General mentioned that we need to be together because this journey is not easy. And about togetherness, I think I recall Pope Francis, todos, todos, todos.
Cada uno en su lengua repita conmigo, todos, todos, todos. No se oye, otra vez, todos, todos, todos. Y esa es la iglesia, la madre de todos. Hay lugar para todos.
In this church, there's room for everyone. It's a contrast of the polarization. This is the spirit of the synodality. And later on, we will listen to Pope Leo's comment on synodality. He mentioned it is an antidote to polarization. So what is synodality? In the final document, it defines us, it is walking together of Christians with Christ towards God's kingdom in union with all humanity, all of us. So it's oriented towards mission. It involves gathering at all levels of the church for mutual listening, dialogue, and communal discernment. This is where we can offer for a discernment in common. It involves reaching consensus as an expression of Christ. So in these few days, we will look into this, the process of the communal discernment. And it consists in reaching decisions according to differentiated co-responsibilities. It is a path of spiritual renewal and spiritual reform. I remember in Salamanca, we listened to the key persons in Synod, Sister Natalie and Father Giacomo. One of their sharing that inspires me is how they contemplate and they really give witness. They see the Spirit is working everywhere to implement synodality step by step. First of all, there are different starting points and different rhythms across the whole world. And the direction is very clear. It's not top down, but it is clear from the grassroots to the Pope. There are lots of convergence and initiatives, so it's much more than coincidence. It doesn't make a lot of noise, but it is a profound movement. And the Spirit is coherent to move forward the reception of Vatican II. They also said, if you contemplate in today's world, there is an immense need to be listened to. People yearn to be listened to. And this is the core for the culture of synodality. So it is it brings the necessity of discernment in common. The more we face divisions, sufferings, and challenges, the more we need synodality. We need the synergy of solidarity. We can't discern alone. Imagine, or you feel, I don't know, nowadays sometimes when I look at the news, I sometimes find it difficult to discern whether the news is true or fake, right? We need community, we need to share, we need to talk, we need to be listened to. We can't discern alone in a fast-changing world with complex situations and polycrisis. So all of these, aren't these signs to call for this culture of synodality? And I think many people have shown this contrast, right? Some of us say we were very moved to see the synod. You can't imagine they're sitting in this circle decades ago, right? And this is also very encouraging from Sister Natalie. She said that, there are resistance and fear, but don't be afraid. Resistance and fears are signs that transformation is happening. Something's happening, something's changing. So people are not used to. So that's resistance and fear. What we need to do is to listen, to journey together and continue to walk. So let's listen to the words from Pope Leo and about synodality.
I think that synodality is an attitude, an openness, a willingness to understand that, speaking of the church now, that each and every member of the church has a voice and a role to play. And that through prayer, reflection, the method that was used in the recent synod, which has been called conversation in the spirit, but through a process, and there's many ways that could happen, but of dialogue and respect of one another, to bring people together and to understand that relationship, that interaction, that creating opportunities of encounter is an important dimension of how we live our life as church. Some people have felt threatened by that. Sometimes bishops or priests might feel synodality is going to take away my authority. That's not what synodality is about. And maybe your idea of what your authority is somewhat out of focus, mistaken. I think that synodality is a way of describing how we can come together and be a community and seek communion as a church. So that it's a church whose primary focus is not on an institutional hierarchy, but rather on a sense of we together, our church, and each person with his or her own vocation, priests or laity or bishops, missionaries, families, everyone with the specific vocation that they've been given has a role to play and something to contribute. And together we look for the way to grow and walk together as church. It's again an attitude which I think can teach a lot for the world today. I think that if a little bit ago we were talking about polarization, I think this is sort of an antidote. I think this is a way of addressing some of the greatest challenges that we have in the world today and saying, if we listen to the gospel and if we reflect upon it together, and if we strive to walk forward together, listening to one another, trying to discover what God is saying to us today, I think there's a lot to be gained for us there. And so I do very much hope that the process, if you will, that began long before the last synod, at least in Latin America, and I think I've spoken about my experience there, and again, some of the Latin American church has really contributed to the Universal Church. But I think there's great hope if we can continue to build on the experience of the past couple of years and find ways of being church together, not to try and transform the church into some kind of democratic government, which, if we look at many countries around the world today, democracy is not necessarily a perfect solution to everything, or at least the way that, with its limitations, it's moving about, but respecting, understanding the life of the church for what it is, and saying we have to do this together.
And the preparatory documents, back to the beginning of the synod, it says very clearly, the spirit of synodality or synod at that time is not to produce documents, but to plant dreams. Yeah. To draw forth prophecies and visions that allow hope to flourish. It's all about dream. And back in the year 2001, I think it's a synod on young people. The dream of the young people is a church that is authentic, free, fraternal, relational, concrete, transparent, committed. And that is synodal. So the young people have shared their voice a couple years earlier than the synod. 2 weeks ago, I introduced a synodality to a parish council members of a parish in Hong Kong. And I asked them to share what is their dream for the parish. They come up with something almost the same as this. It's not a coincidence. So what is your dream for a synodal church? So earlier on at ask what are the challenges that you face in your church, in your community, in your institution. And if you flip the coin around, so what is your dream for a synodal church? I'd like to invite you to pause for a moment and allow words to come up in your heart. What is a dream in your context? And now I invite you to, oh good, you're sitting in groups of triad. So why don't you share with your neighbor in your table? What is your dream for a synodal church? Share among yourselves. Yeah, take 10 minutes to share among yourselves. What is your dream for a synodal church? You know, one of the report of the study group 9 has just recently published. And is about the theology of behind this criteria for discernment in common in pastoral and ethical aspects. And they say it's a paradigm shift. It's not to see these problems to be fixed, but emerging issues, cause that wants us to listen to, especially the people in the peripheries, the voiceless, and also the Mother Earth. It's paradigm shift. So these are the dreams. My question is it possible that our dream is also God's dream? This is something maybe you will take on to prayer later. But before we move on to prayer, this is a dream, but how about the realities? So let's listen to Ed and Ian will share some of their experience in walking with the church in synodality, the reality, the real situation. So Ian and Ed.
So my experience has been with parish groups, with religious congregations, bishops, plenary councils and synods. And these two people here were the two youngest people in the synod. Wyatt was only 19. But just to give you an example of where things can go wrong, because in the conversations I've had so far, there are two issues that have been raised. One was about names and the other one was about when things go wrong. This young lady here has a stepsister who was gay, and she committed suicide. And this came up in one of the groups that she was in. And a little bit later on, I think it was the next day, one of the archbishops came back and said, "You're a liar," because the stepsister had a different name. He was saying, "You're not related to her." And this really upset her, so much so that, in fact, Cardinal Grech actually had to come and mediate for them. Yeah, because, yeah. So just being sensitive to where people are is really, really important. The one about names, when the tables were in the tables, one of the first things we did was to kind of get to know you. And the question was, what do you want to be called? And it was amazing. In all the English-speaking groups, everybody said, "Call me by my first name." Cardinals, archbishops, bishops, call me by my first name. I don't think I could go back and say to people, "Hello, Robert, how you doing?" Not now, but yeah. So that broke, the ice, so to speak, where that was the first step in becoming friends, becoming to know each other, which I think is really important work to be done at the beginning of any discernment group to really bed down the relationships.
I was part of a retreat where we were going to try a new model. So it was accustomed to having a silent retreat we're going to now have small group spiritual conversations. So I had worked with the team, and so we built a new schedule, a different way of doing things. I think maybe we scheduled 3 spiritual conversations in the course of a weekend. And so then it was identifying facilitators that were going to be with each of the groups. And since I did not know the retreatants, I was relying on our little team to come up with those who would give the facilitation. And I joined one of the groups, not as the facilitator, just a participant. And so the woman who was there, sort of opened it up for conversation. In the course of our time together, I learned about the traffic of coming to the retreat house. I learned about how the retreats, the number of people had been dwindling. I learned where the best donuts were to be purchased within the vicinity of the retreat house. The facilitator's only concern was to have everyone talk. It became more like a coffee clutch, just chit-chat. And she did a lot of talking, just sort of like it was a series of conversations. But we avoided talking about what was going on in the retreat. There was a discomfort. And so the discomfort ruled the conversation. I left the group depressed. It's like, this is not what I was hoping to see for our spiritual conversation. A couple weeks later, I was going to another retreat house, and this was just a day of prayer. But this was a group that was regularly meeting, more like a CLC group. And again, they were going to have spiritual conversation twice in the day, and I just joined one of the groups. This time it was a spiritual director who was giving the facilitation. And she just had everybody quiet. What is a grace that is surfacing for you in our day of prayer? And is there, a distraction? Is there a way in which you're being tempted to be pulled away from the retreat? She just guided the kind of process that was going on. And everyone participated and contributed. And then she did that second round. What did we hear? And she really insisted, now we're talking, but we're listening. And now let us share. It was a great group. And I left and it's like, the necessity to have facilitators who are well prepared to guide the spiritual conversation. It's essential. That was really what the lesson I walked away from those 2 experiences.
A question I heard Xavier ask the other night was he wanted to learn about what to do when things get really difficult. So during the plenary council in Australia, there was a whole lot of topics came up, and we had by the way, Australia was the one that kind of started the round table thing. And they're in the round tables, and it came, and I said to the bishop that was the head of our committee organising this, I said, this is going to be the topic where we're going to have trouble. And of course, it was the topic of women in the church. So when it came to that topic to be discussed, it really blew up. So what to do? And I said to him, I kept thinking, what would Ignatius do? What have we learned as spiritual directors? When somebody's in difficult, you take them back a few steps. Take them back to a consolation or a prayer period. So that's exactly what we did in the discernment. We took people back to the prayer and then brought it forward again. So you don't forget what you've learned as a spiritual director, because in one sense, the facilitator is the spiritual guide for the group. They're the ones that are listening for the consolations, the desolations, listening for not just the words, but the deeper movements within the group.
And we all face different circumstances, different communities that we have to adapt to. In Micronesia, it is a culture where elders are revered. And so the elders are the ones who speak, and those who are younger listen. So to do a spiritual conversation with mixed age groups, so I was doing this with our deacon candidates, and the one guy pulled me aside and said, I can't talk in front of the elders, it's my role to listen. He was, only 35 years old. So it's like, now, would you consider me an elder? Yes. And if I ask you to share, is that something you would obey? Yes. Okay, we have our way forward. Adapting to the culture, and just having the conversation about how do we in this place move forward? It requires some creativity, listening, adapting. Okay, so one last word.
One last one. Yeah. This is one of my horror stories. During this synod, on one particular, we moved around, as facilitators, we moved tables. Every now and again, depending on the topic, we moved topics. So this particular table, I had a cardinal, 2 archbishops, and some other bishops, and 1 diocesan priest. And we were told that we were going to visit one of the catacombs. And everybody just presumed that this was an excursion. So some people signed up and some people didn't. When the forms went back in, it was discovered that no, this was not a choice. This was part of the prayer of the synod, that we would go and pray in the place of the martyrs. So there was an older African archbishop sitting alongside me, and he said to me, I don't think I can go. He said, I'm not feeling very well and I don't think I can do the trip. I said, that's fine, you don't have to go. If you're not well, stay here, that's okay. And then when the thing came around again for people to sign up saying, you've got to go, he said to me again, I don't think I can go. And I said, well, that's fine, you stay there. Anyway, a little bit later on, he was sitting by me here, and the Archbishop from the other side of the table came round, and they had this conversation. He was saying to the Archbishop, I don't think I can go to this, I don't feel very well. And he said, the Archbishop said, well, you don't have to go. And then this guy said, but our facilitator is encouraging us to go. And the Archbishop said, you don't have to do what he says, you're higher than he is. So I was really put in my place. That can happen, but yeah. There's lots of other stories, and I can tell them. Yeah. Good stories, by the way. I've just told you a few horror stories, but yeah, anyway, good.
Thank you. Thank you to Ian and Ed. I think we hope that their sharing will also inspire you to to recall your experience, whether it is easy and joyful experience or whether it is challenges. Yeah, allow your experience to surface. And in a couple of minutes, we would like to invite you to go into your silent prayer. And first to pray with this, pray with the Holy Trinity, to see how the 3 divine persons gaze on the whole surface of the world, and what are their dreams, and what are their desires. Share your desire with them. And also share your joys and your challenges with them as well. So for the small group spiritual conversation, we would like to try to practice 3 rounds. Even though we don't have anything to discern at this stage, it would be good to start, especially during the 2nd and the 3rd round, to start contemplating on the movement of the Spirit. How is the Holy Spirit present? And how is the Spirit moving us? Yeah. So amongst yourselves, we would like you to find a facilitator. So in these few days, you will have different conversations. So we would like you to take turns so everybody can get a chance to facilitate, because that's why you are coming here for, to learn how to facilitate. So a facilitator starting this morning. And we will also like you to have somebody to take note and to report back. Now for the note taker, you only need to take the consensus, the third round, or whatever comes up as a consensus. You don't need to take the process, okay?